If the fuel convoys stop moving through a high-threat zone like Sanaa, Yemen today, the American embassy goes dark tomorrow. I mean, it's that fast.
Yeah, completely dark. The communication servers crash. The perimeter security fails.
Right. The blast doors literally won't operate. And global diplomacy just grinds to an absolute terrifying halt. Welcome to the deep dive, by the way. You know, when you think of global diplomacy, you usually picture, like, treaties, motorcades, and grand embassy ballrooms.
Oh, absolutely. The tailored suits, the clinking glasses. But what actually keeps the lights on, the walls standing, and the diplomats fed in some of those dangerous places on Earth?
Exactly. And that's what we have today. We have our hands on a massive stack of highly detailed U.S. Department of State contracting documents for something called DIP-ESS. That's Diplomatic Platform Support Services.
Right, it's a massive global program.
Yeah, and we're bypassing the high-level summaries today. We are looking directly at the intricate attachments from past performance surveys to service category breakdowns.
Because the sheer physical reality of maintaining an American presence abroad is staggering. And, it's rarely the diplomats themselves doing the heavy lifting.
No, not at all. So our mission today is to decode these bureaucratic blueprints, basically, and uncover the massive hidden logistical machine that powers America's global presence, all the way from peaceful, low-threat cities to high-threat war zones.
It's a highly regulated ecosystem of private contractors operating under just intense scrutiny.
Okay, let's unpack this, because before anyone can build a wall or deliver a single drop of fuel to an embassy, they have to actually win the contract, right?
Right. They have to pass the vetting.
And looking at attachments 11 and 12, the relevant experience and past performance, this background check is just borderline obsessive.
Well, it has to be. The Department of State isn't just handing over the keys to an overseas post to anyone with, a basic logistics background.
Yeah, the granularity is wild. In the Relevant Experience Questionnaire, they demand that companies classify their employees by highly specific function codes. I saw they track everything from an A01 accountable property officer all the way down the alphabet to a D01 warehouse supervisor.
Right, they standardize the entire workforce.
But I mean, why go to that level of detail? If you're a massive logistics firm, shouldn't the government just trust that you know how to hire a guy to run a warehouse?
Trust is just not a metric the government can afford to use here. Because in a contingency environment, a warehouse supervisor isn't just, counting boxes of printer paper.
Right.
That W01 supervisor might be managing the distribution of critical medical supplies or specialized generator parts during a localized uprising.
Wow. Okay, so the stakes are way higher.
Exactly.
Hey.
The government needs quantifiable proof that your specific personnel have operated at that specific tier of pressure before. And they track the financial stability of the company just as ruthlessly.
Yeah, I saw that. That brings us to the revenue index numbers. They force contractors to categorize their financial bandwidth on a scale, starting at Category 1.
Which is under $100,000 in average annual revenue.
Right, all the way up to Category 10, which is $50 million or greater. I assume this isn't just about making sure they have deep pockets to buy office chairs.
No, it's about cash flow survival. Imagine you're a contractor running operations in a country where the local banking system suddenly collapses, due to a coup.
Oh, wow.
You still have to pay your local drivers, buy fuel, secure food. And if the U.S. government takes 90 days to process an invoice due to bureaucratic delays back in Washington...
Which happens all the time.
Right. Yeah. Does your company have the Category 10 financial muscle to float millions of dollars in operating costs without halting services? If you don't, the embassy starves.
That makes the stakes of this vetting process so much clearer. But then there's the past performance survey. The government essentially grades these contractors across 6 different areas.
It's an extreme report card.
Yeah, grading them from unacceptable to excellent on things like quality of services, cost control, and small business utilization. When I read this, my first thought was that this is like the most intense, high-stakes Yelp review imaginable, but for multi-million-dollar government contractors.
There he is.
But let me push back on this. How do you actually prove something as subjective as management effectiveness? Is it just a popularity contest among contractors? Like, if the contracting officer likes your project manager, do you magically get an excellent...
No, the reality is much harsher than a popularity contest.
Yeah.
It's deeply empirical. To get an excellent, you can't just say, oh, the client liked us. You have to provide documented proof of managing complex projects. Yeah. Because the government is looking for quantifiable metrics. For example, did your cost reports arrive on time, down to the exact day? for 36 consecutive months.
Jeez.
Or when a regulatory issue popped up with a host nation's labor laws, did your team proactively flag it and mitigate the risk before the embassy was served with a lawsuit?
So the Yelp review analogy only works if the Yelp reviewer is demanding to see your internal audit logs.
Exactly. And take it a step further. If a contractor fails at management effectiveness or regulatory compliance, the consequences aren't just a bad quarter for shareholders.
Right, it's a diplomatic incident.
Exactly. Literal disasters.
Yeah.
If you mismanage a supply chain, the embassy generator dies. If you violate local labor laws, you hand a hostile host nation a legitimate legal reason to raid the embassy's local contractor offices.
Wow. Okay, so once a contractor actually survives this brutal background check and wins the bid, how do they run operations across the globe? This brings us to Service Category 1 and Attachment 3.
Right, the actual on-the-ground management.
The DIPSS contract supports up to 250 post and consulate locations globally, and that includes high-threat environments like Afghanistan, Iraq, and Yemen.
It's a massive footprint, and they manage it by dividing the labor very intentionally. There's a fascinating dividing line for task orders in these documents.
The $20 million line, right? Tasks over $20 million are generally for large companies, but those under $20 million are specifically targeted for small businesses to participate in.
Yeah.
But why bother carving out a specific tier for small businesses in a war zone? Wouldn't it just be safer to hand the entire portfolio to a giant defense conglomerate?
Well, that sounds efficient, but large conglomerates move slowly. The government needs the massive scale of the Category 10 companies for heavy infrastructure, sure, but they desperately need the agility of small businesses.
Oh, like specialized local knowledge.
Exactly. A smaller firm might have a deeply established niche network of local vendors in one specific region of North Africa that a massive global conglomerate simply cannot replicate.
That makes total sense. But whether you're a small business or a huge corporation, the documents mandate strict adherence to the PMBO.
The project management body of knowledge.
Right, the standard corporate project management rules. They specifically require the executing, monitoring, and controlling and closing process groups. I'm reading these corporate rules, things like perform integrated change control or manage stakeholder engagement. Hey, are they really using standard corporate project management rules in active contingency environments like Yemen?
What's fascinating here is that this rigid corporate structure is exactly why it works.
Really? Because it sounds completely counterintuitive to me.
I know. If you've ever managed a corporate budget, you know how annoying change order forms are?
Yeah.
You'd think a war zone requires total on-the-fly improvisation.
Exactly.
But when the environment outside the embassy walls is totally chaotic, the management framework inside the spreadsheets must be absolute. The PMBOK processes like control risks, control costs, validate scope, they provide a universal language.
So you're saying that because the delivery route might literally explode, you need zero explosions in the accounting department?
Think about the mechanics of it. Say a local supply route is certainly cut off by hostile militia forces. You do not want your logistics team sitting in a bunker arguing over the radio about how to track the extra expenses of hiring a new convoy. In that moment of panic, the PMBOK process, perform integrated change control, kicks in.
Oh, so it's a pre-agreed-upon checklist.
Exactly. The contractor knows exactly how to formally request the schedule change, the government knows how to approve the budget variance, and the operation moves forward. It keeps the logistics from falling apart when the environment gets hostile.
That completely reframes bureaucratic red tape for me. It's basically an anchor to reality. But here's where it gets really interesting. Moving from the abstract management rules to the physical survival of these posts.
Right, categories 2 and 4.
Critical procurement and construction in high-threat posts. Reading through the fuel delivery requirements, it felt like looking at a military-grade Amazon Prime delivery network.
That is a very accurate analogy.
But the cargo is highly explosive, it's targeted by warlords, and it requires complex border and customs negotiations. Fuel is a critical vulnerability, right?
The absolute lifeblood. At high-threat posts, the U.S. doesn't rely on the local power grid at all. It's too vulnerable to sabotage. They run their own independent generators.
And the contractor must maintain a 30-day supply of fuel on site.
At all times. But getting that 30-day supply across a desert is incredibly risky. Fuel in a conflict zone is basically liquid gold. It's a massive target for the black market.
Which is why the documents mandate strict tracking. They use COT commercial off-the-shelf real-time freight tracking software.
They track the convoy every single inch of the route.
Because drivers might pull over, siphon out 100 gallons of diesel, sell it on the black market, and replace it with water to make the tank look full right.
Exactly. And that leads directly to the strict adherence to technical standards you see in the documents like PlayIT and ASTM D4814.
Yeah, I saw ASTM D4814. I mean, I understand wanting good gas, but why force a contractor to adhere to a strict chemical specification while dodging mortars?
Because if a local vendor waters down that diesel, it alters the combustion point and destroys the generator's engine.
Oh, wow.
And a broken generator in a contingency environment is a catastrophic security failure. The cameras die, the electric locks fail. Chemistry is perimeter defense.
Chemistry is perimeter defense. I love that. And on top of vetted local vendors and fuel chemistry, these contractors have to be environmental hazard experts.
Oh, absolutely.
The documents say they must have spill remediation plans ready. They have to keep MSDS materials safety data sheets on hand at all times.
It shows the bizarre dual nature of the contractor's job. On Tuesday, they have to be local diplomats themselves, dealing with host government permits and checkpoint bottlenecks.
Right.
And on Wednesday, they're managing toxic spills to ensure a highly flammable convoy doesn't trigger an international environmental lawsuit.
It is wild. And they aren't just moving liquid, they're physically building the posts under Category 4, construction. The documents outline the emplacement of CHU's containerized housing units and the moving of massive concrete T-walls to absorb blast impacts.
Yes, but the contract heavily regulates how this is built. They strictly distinguish between light construction and minor construction.
Yeah, light construction is defined as under 120 man-hours and less than $250,000, right?
Exactly. That might cover moving some CHUs around a compound.
Yeah.
But the second a project requires 121 man-hours or costs $250,001, it becomes minor construction.
And I'm guessing that triggers a whole new level of bureaucracy.
An entirely different tier of funding approval, oversight, and auditing from the State Department.
Of course it does. But, let's shift gears entirely here because not every embassy is a war zone. What do these contractors do in medium or low threat posts?
That brings us to Service Category 5.
Yes, the vast array of mundane, everyday services that actually make up the bulk of diplomatic life. I'd have to say the sheer whiplash of these documents is crazy.
The contrast is jarring, isn't it?
Totally.
Yeah.
You move from anti-terrorism fuel tracking in Iraq to making sure the embassy grass is mowed. I mean, the staggering variety of services listed here: diplomatic pouch services, motor pool operations, vouchering,
Payroll services for locally employed staff.
leasing residential properties. They run the Customer Liaison Office, or CLO. They even manage highly specific domestic tasks like pooled furniture. The documents specifically note they have to warehouse and deliver washers, dryers, transformers.
They even have to reupholster government-owned rugs and draperies.
Right, reupholstering rugs. Providing custodial services, which the contract calls the CHAR force, fixing leaky faucets, setting up conference rooms. It feels so trivial compared to tracking warlords.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you'll see why the leaky faucets are just as critical as the blast walls.
Really?
Yes. An embassy is effectively a self-sustaining municipality. It is a miniature American city dropped into a foreign country.
I hadn't thought of it like that.
The U.S. is taking its highly trained diplomats, uprooting their families, and placing them in unfamiliar environments. If a diplomat's basic life infrastructure is crumbling, they cannot focus on their mission.
Right. If you arrive in a new capital and the contractor hasn't leased your housing, you're basically homeless.
Exactly. Or imagine the CHAR force fails to properly clean secure facilities or mishandles sensitive trash. Without payroll for the local staff, without mailrooms, and without working air conditioners, the highest-level diplomats simply cannot execute foreign policy.
You can't negotiate a bilateral trade agreement if your local staff hasn't been paid in 3 weeks and your kids don't have a working washing machine.
The grand treaties we imagine are entirely dependent on someone successfully managing the motor pool and the petty cash vouchers.
That is fascinating. Well, we have covered incredible ground today, from A01 accountable property officers and the intense Yelp-style past performance reviews to replacing concrete T-walls and managing motor pools. I think you, the listener, now really understand the incredible logistical skeleton that supports U.S. diplomacy.
It's a massive hidden machine.
It really is. So what does this all mean?
Well, I'd leave you with a final, lingering thought to ponder. We've seen how this single DIP PSS framework, standardizes everything from heavy construction in Afghanistan to furniture pools in Europe. So does it mean that private contracting companies are actually the true permanent backbone of America's global footprint?
Oh, wow.
Think about it. Ambassadors rotate out, diplomats move to new postings, political administrations in Washington inevitably change. But these logistical systems and the companies that run them, they remain. They provide a hidden continuity that outlasts any single diplomat or political era.
That is something to think about. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the hidden machinery of the world. Keep digging into the fascinating systems that run our world, and we'll see you next time.